Oh, yeah. What is up, BoDaddy?
Good morning, my friend.
Hi, Lori. Lori, you know, you didn't like our conspiracy theory aliens intro, but you gave me a hard time about it. And the other one they have loaded up here is just too it's just too soft and inspirational. It might put us back to sleep in the morning. So I thought a little funky bass line would do you good.
Yeah, that was actually I enjoyed that new wrinkle.
I didn't even know what sound it was going to play. I just said, "Oh, they got a new one on here. I'm going to try this."
Yeah, I liked it. I think it would be great, like before, like a round table at a conference. It would be the sort of thing that would help everybody get to their seats.
Ooh, ooh. Was this a segue? Was this a segue? So I can tell everyone, y'all should come hang out with me and Bo at Theology Beer Camp, theologybeer.camp, Theology Beer Camp 2025. There we go. Um, you know, Bo, you
Yeah,
want me to tell you some things that are going to happen at Theology Beer Camp? I haven't told anyone,
I would love that.
but we're going to officially share some of this information next Thursday night. Kristen, camp director, is joining me, and
Oh
but she's probably still sleeping. You know she's pregnant.
no!
Yes, I am allowed to say that publicly. I totally just thought for a second, oh junk. Anyway, um,
Come
so
on.
she's like in that like transition point of the early part, oh,
Yep.
then getting bigger, and then like I'm tired randomly, and I'm just like, look, Alicia had 3 kids. You can just be like, I feel pregnant today. Just don't, like you can even make it up once or twice, and then we can move stuff around. But she's like, no, we got to do the announcement before.
Yeah.
Who knows. So Thursday night, Kristen and Sarah Heath are joining. We're going to announce some things. But
Oh.
but why I'm telling you this is you had the idea about, oh, we got to do like we should mix things up where keynoters kind of do things, and then we can do theology nerd panels and level it up. So here's one of them. One of
Okay,
them we're doing.
I'm ready.
All right. So John Dominic Crossan had this idea, right? So one, he's like, look, I'm 92. Last time I came to camp, my plane flight messed up. I didn't get to hang out. And so I want to come back again, but so I can hang out. I just can't I can't do anything after dinner. Is that okay? He's like, I might hang out or something, but and I'm like, you can just tell me what you want to do. You're JC. So he said, I want to do a talk on the groaning of creation and how Paul would tell the biblical story and the crises we face, but use Paul's vision to talk about our present one. And he goes, and I think it makes sense because it's really the challenge we've inherited in evolution, but I don't know science. Can you get me a friend? Can you get one of your friends that's into science and religion to then tell the cosmic story on the same theme? And I said, this is a good idea because Bo said we should have some keynotes and then have them do something similar and then do a theology nerd panel where all the
Hmm.
footnotes for both talks set up the talk. So then Phil Clayton said he'd do it.
Yes.
So we're going to have like the cosmic story in the
Oh,
groaning of creation from the biblical perspective. Then Phil will tell the cosmic story science perspective. Then theology nerd throwdown, Phil, Dom, how those two stories relate. What do we do as people of faith? How do they
whoa,
reanimate each other,
whoa.
orient each other towards justice and thriving in the present? Come on. If I
That's
had my air horn, I'd hit it right now.
I was hoping you were going to say Phil Clayton. That when he said find a friend, I was like, "Oh, I hope I know where this is going."
Yeah. Yeah. And you know who else is coming?
No, tell me.
I haven't told anyone. Kelly Brown Douglas.
Oh, huh.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And may not even be the only prestigious womanist theologian coming to camp. I'm just saying. That's just teasing. Just teasers right there. We'll tell more on Thursday.
Here's a funny Minneapolis connection. You know, Tripp, I grew up Billy Graham evangelical, and I was just a couple towns over in suburban Chicago from the Billy Graham Center at
Uh-huh.
Wheaton. And my father used to take us over there. And one of my favorite things is, Billy Graham used to get mail from all over the world. What a lot of people don't know is that at the end of his, sermons, he would always say this on the TV broadcast. Um, he would say, if you just put Billy Graham, Minneapolis, Minnesota, it'll get to me. The post office will get it to me. And so he had letters from all over the world and on display. But my favorite one is they had supersized. They'd blown up this envelope from somewhere far across the globe, and it said,
Bo, your mic just went crazy.
"Okay, hold on.
Oh wait, now it's perfect.
You know what it is? My fan kicked on. Let me change my angle here."
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that or your computer was just mad at Billy Graham and was just like, you thought he
You
was
know,
just a kind of
it,
a milquetoast evangelical, ignoring the
it,
materialist commitments for mutual flourishing in the Bible.
it just suddenly overheated.
But sometimes um, what starts with a Billy turns to a Franklin, and then
I'm gonna try this.
Franklin Graham evangelicalism is its own thing.
How am I gonna do this? Hold on.
I don't know.
I gotta rig something. Hold on.
Hit mute on yourself while you rig yourself, and I'm just gonna say things. Okay, so John Augustine is in the chat. So is Joshua and Lori, Jasmine. Excellent. John, you're local for Theology Beer Camp. I was going to text you or something. Now that we're here, I I I want to get as many of the students at Luther who've been in my classes and stuff that like coming to camp, because there are 5 of y'all that have been before. We're coming up in April to do a site visit. I want to invite everyone. We want to go to some of the breweries giving beer to camp and do some promo videos with you know with locals who also enjoy that beer. Kristen and I talked about it, but now I remembered it. And
I'm down for
he's
it.
on the stream. So John also was in my class this semester.
Okay.
And you know how like sometimes like you're grading papers, and then you get like the student who comes to you at the beginning is like, I want to write a paper, like hardcore research paper, like I want to do a PhD kind of thing. And he wrote one on Tillich and Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Wow.
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. I told the guys over at Systematic Ecology they just should have him come on and talk about it, because they like all the pop culture stuff. And it was good. Like I got done and then I messaged Andy Root, who works there, and was just like, have you had Augustine in a class? And he's like, I've taught Augustine before. I said, no, John Augustine, the student. You see what I'm saying? and he hadn't. So that Andy doesn't get any credit for how good this paper is. All right.
So back to the story. So one of the envelopes that they had supersized, it just said Billy Graham, many apples, many sodas. And it made it to him.
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Many sodas.
Oh, that was their attempt at saying the state.
Many apples, many sodas. So every time we talk about Minnesota, that's what I think about.
And that's quality. That's quality. And yes, Lori, Rolf will be there, but we're waiting to announce things till Thursday. Next week at 9:00, or I don't know, it's in the evening. Anyway.
Hey, I have a couple stories I've been waiting to tell you between your travels and in illness ravaging your family.
Yeah, those kids' schools are just sharing. They're sharing is caring. They were like, look, just because the federal government doesn't want to share doesn't mean public schools don't anymore. Let's just share the germs.
All right, so 2 stories I've been waiting to tell you. I've been doing 2 experiments. One's going well, one's not. And I want to brainstorm this with you. So the one that's going well is about 6 months ago, I came up with the idea to take the M out of compassion and to go with co-passion, like the Great Co-Mission, but instead call it the Great Co-Passion. And instead of the church, doing compassion ministries for, our community and surrounding city. Instead, I wanted to open up the space and invite people who have a passion to partner with us so that we would basically be hosting the space, but not doing the ministry. We would be co-passion with people in their areas of interest. And Tripp, it has set off a domino effect that is going incredibly well. And so what's happened is some of our co-passion ministries, like our clothing closet, which is run by a group of ladies that's not a part of our church. They are passionate about this, and they used to do it out of a semi-trailer. And sometimes they would serve 500 to 700 people with these events, because they were not very regular events. So they were like standalone, and now they have the ability twice a month. We've given them a space that we fixed up and repainted so it looks really nice, and that they can set up their clothes on clothing racks and Tupperware bins, and it is going incredibly well. But the domino effect that it set off is that some people who come to volunteer at that, they have different passions. And so they said, hey, is it possible that we could have space to do this thing that we really care about? And I'd say, yeah, we have a room upstairs that we can. So we've been slowly finding our partners that come to us and tell us about their passion. And then we make space for them. And then they bring volunteers and we partner with them in these community services. And we're becoming like a hub of goodness in our downtown historic building here, where people know that they can come and not only get what they or their neighbors might need, but also that there's a possibility that the thing they care the most about, there's space for. And we are slowly, as we move rooms, we fix up that room, and then we pray as we fix it up and paint it. We pray about who God might be calling to be in that space, and they're coming. And it's just so incredible. And I just wanted to tell you that this thing about taking the M out of compassion, that it's something we do for them. Instead, we host this space and they come with their passion and we partner with them. So it's a co-passion. And it's one of the best things I have come up with in a long time.
Well, I remember when you talked about it, I always think you come up with the most catchy things. Just, let's put a dash in there. Most of, when you get a PhD, you usually use dashes and slashes and stuff to make things less understandable. Or you add the word ness on the end of a word.
That's true.
Yeah. No, that one's good. Like the only time when I took the G out of kingdom, so it's just kingdom. That way it gets rid of the cock and the crown. And that one was catchy. But most of the other times I tried stuff like that, real big failures.
Yeah, they're not all winners. I admit that. This one happens to have struck a chord.
Plus, you like painting and stuff like that.
Oh, I love DIY reno stuff.
You're just like, the only problem being a Methodist doing that is, if your like regional head learns that, he's just going to start moving you around to every church that needs some physical updating, and watch out.
No, I'm very aware. It's one of the things when I first got appointed here, I think I had developed a reputation at my church in Portland of doing reno on older facilities that had deferred maintenance, as we say. And so in my introduction to the leadership team here, I told him, I said, I'm not your average pastor. I'm a third, like 1/3 pastor / unemployed philosopher, sociologist. I'm a third construction worker and a third sort of poet. And
Oh,
so I'm an
I was gonna think
oddball.
eye candy because liturgically themed eyewear.
People ask me about my glasses, and the funny thing is, and I love this story so much. For 2 years in Portland, we were in lockdown and didn't meet live in person. We only met on Zoom.
Hmm.
And during that 2 years, I was looking at a computer screen so much between Zooms and PhD research and my doctoral stuff that I didn't realize how bad my eyes had gotten. So the first Sunday that we were back in the sanctuary, I stood up to preach, and I take my Bible and I go to read it, and I can't read it. So I'm holding it out at arm's length, as far away as my long arms can go, because my eyes, I was so used to reading, and I would put the passage up on the screen in 26-point font so that everybody could see it. I had not read a physical Bible in 2 years, and I didn't realize how bad my eyes had gotten.
Well, oh, I saw throughout lockdown just how much my hair thinned. It was depressing
And
because you
the
notice
tough
that
part is,
on screen. You're sitting there and you're like,
yeah,
oh no, I
yeah,
should have washed it because
you're
it's
looking
a
at
little
yourself
greasy
on the screen.
and I can see scalp. And
It's true. It's true.
so I just had an idea. So you got these co-passion
Yeah.
projects. You should do something to feature them all during Passion Week, like
Oh,
on the church social media or something,
that is
like
good.
co-passion week, and you do a little featurette maybe with someone outside of the community tells their passion and how y'all are excited
So
to
good.
celebrate it. And
Yep.
yeah, because
That's it. That is a genius idea.
oh well, look, I feel like we've already won the episode. Now who knows what's going to happen. That's high
Yeah.
quality material. And my favorite is when I get messages from clergy that are like, the best thing about you and Bo doing TNT again is like he'll throw stuff out, y'all go back and forth, and then by the end, stuff you say on the podcast that I'm really intrigued by. There's some way of actually talking about it at church because y'all go back and forth, and then I'm like, oh, that's what Tripp means. Oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, Bo gave us a really catchy way of talking about this. And
Nice.
that's why I say, like, you're like the Magic Johnson of podcasting. You know,
Ah,
like,
it means a lot when you say that. I appreciate that.
no, I look, I'm not gonna assess other people on live internet, but
What you
it's
don't
always
want to be,
weeks where I don't think we get to talk, or it's not nearly as fun.
yeah, yeah. What you don't want to be is the Russell Westbrook of podcasting.
No, you don't. You don't. I feel like Russell Westbrook is more of a solo show personality
That's right.
because he plays like his hair's on fire. I love watching Russell
True.
Westbrook. When he went to the Lakers, I was like, this is going to be great, and it wasn't. And I was so sad. It derailed. We got rid of the very type of lineup that won a championship. And we're like, look, we're gonna have Russell Westbrook. This is gonna be great. No, now
Mm,
getting Luca, that's what I'm talking about.
yeah.
That's what I'm talking. I have no idea what Dallas was thinking. This was literally the dumbest trade I've ever seen. Um, and I really like AD, but I harass my Mavericks friends and be like, "Oh, when's his contract up? He needs to force his way to LA." And he didn't. He didn't want to force his way to LA. He just bought a new house in Dallas the week before he gets traded. And now
Mm,
you get to watch the LeBron and Luca show, and it's just glorious. Is it like I was worried we're gonna have 4 years of train wreck and this I need something to distract me. Well, now during the NBA season, Laker games at night, just a whole another level of enjoyment. You're like, look at
wow.
this, look at this.
I
Run the
forgot.
country in the ground, level up the playoffs for the Lakers. Reasonable trade. I
I
don't have a
actually
lot of
forgot
agency in either.
how much you liked the Lakers. I shouldn't have. Oh, you brought it up. You actually brought it up with the Magic Johnson comment. Hey, let me tell you something that's not going well.
Okay.
So a couple episodes ago, I expressed a desire to reverse the trend that politics had gotten upstream of religion, and that people are choosing actually their religious affiliation and practice, right, based on their allegiance to partisan politics.
Kind of like a king that hears from the actual prophet of the Lord, and it's like, I don't like that. Can I get a new prophet?
Can I
You
get a
got anybody? Got anybody with some of that anointing oil that also thinks we should be friends with Assyria and engage in? Uh,
can I get a second opinion?
can I get a follow up? Do you remember the Sermon on the Mount? Me neither. That's how the interview process for the prophet goes. Sorry, Bo.
No. So here's a glitch I've run into. Side note, you ever move into a new house and like maybe the fridge is in the wrong, just it's in an odd place in the kitchen and you think,
Why is it
why
there?
is that there? It doesn't work there. It
Yes.
should be over here. And you go to move it because you sort of got in your head that it would work better, and then you realize there's no electric outlet over there.
Dude, that is our kitchen. and and we move into this, we buy this house and there's they put a brand new fridge in there in the worst place, right? So if you open the fridge, it blocks the door. And so
Right.
I go through all the trouble of moving it to then realize that one, where the actual water line is nowhere near a power cord.
That's right.
And so you have to decide, do you want an ice maker that works, or do you want a fridge that's plugged in? And I'm like, who did this? Well,
Yes.
like somebody sat there at their job and was thinking, how do we design this kitchen? And they thought, what would be funny is after somebody saves a lot of money and buys their first house and moves in, we want them to have the Sophie's choice of fridge. Like you can either have a third of your freezer have an ice machine that can't make ice, or it's just not cold. That would, or run a freaking extension cord across. Like,
That's right.
I'm like, who did this? They got a D. They got a D. Oh, anyway.
Lori's hilarious in the comment section, by the way. She has the exact same problem. When we went to stage my parents' house to sell after my father's passing, we tried our best to make it look attractive to potential buyers, but we realized that some of the quirky things about the house, the reason they were the way they were is because when you try to move things, it becomes like a Tetris thing. Like, well, hold on. If I put that there, that covers this wall, or there's a window. I don't want to cover the only window in this room. And you realize the reason that things had been in that spot for so long is because that's the only place they work. But until you tried to move it, it didn't make sense. It just seemed like an odd choice and not very functional. So I've run into this with the political conversation going on in our country right now, which is by trying to move religion back upstream of people's politic. I have uncovered something really strange. You ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So in my conversations with my conservative friends and family around the country, I've started asking them, like, what would you look for in a candidate, right? And try and hear their heart. But one of the things that has been confessed to me on several occasions, both by people in my what's that?
Bronzer? It was a joke. Trump's face. Bronzer.
Oh. I did not
Comb
even
over
catch that. So several people have admitted to me that they cannot imagine ever voting for somebody who has a D beside their name. They will say to me, I don't like what's going on with the Republican Party right now, but I could never bring myself to vote for a Democrat. Okay, so that's interesting. That's a data point one. Data point two.
Ooh, did they follow it up by saying, I can't vote for anyone without a D, meaning the phallus?
I have actually heard that too. I've actually heard somebody say, if the Democratic Party wants my vote, they're going to have to stop putting people like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris on the ticket. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oof, ow.
They're like, could we get someone that's neurotic, nonsensical, and just makes your head spin? I was hoping for someone with a large amount of resentment and a life of failures built on inheritance that he was given.
Oh
If we could
my.
just find someone that competent, it would work a lot better.
Wow.
I would like to be reminded of total depravity when my president speaks.
I don't, by the way, Tripp, I don't believe in total depravity. I just believe in sufficient depravity.
Well, it is a ubiquitous feature of our species.
It is. I heard that quote one time and I've never forgot it. All right, but here's data point two. Here's the what I think is the more interesting, as weird as that first one was. Here's the thing I've run into. On the other end of the political spectrum in this country, I've discovered an odd glitch with my more liberal, progressive, democratic friends. So we had a International Women's Day rally here in one of our new spaces. What used to be the choir room, we have now called the community room, and we've rearranged it and decluttered it. And it's our largest and nicest room. And we've invited the community to use it for outside things, not sanctioned by the church or, but just it's a community room. Okay. So we had an International Women's Rally there, and the room was packed, more than 100 people. It was just fantastic. It was standing room only. But the next day and the following day after that, I got some negative feedback from some people who I thought would be excited for something like the International Women's Day rally. And I was really surprised at their level of concern and agitation that we had hosted that here. And it turns out that it's because one of the 6 partner groups for hosting the rally was the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA. And through listening to people's concern, I discovered that for a couple of my registered Democrats, they really dislike the DSA because in a state like Idaho, where only 14% vote Democratic, it splits people's loyalty. And so they actually view the DSA in a very negative way because they think that they are taking attention away from the Idaho Democrats. And that if we, there's only 14%, that if those who lean that way banded together, they would have a bigger voting bloc. But because they have divided loyalties, there's like a real resentment between the two groups. And so one of the things that I've had to step back from my little project is that I should just say that's data point 2. Here's data point 3. I've also been invited to join a group, an online group of progressive pastors who minister in non-progressive areas. Okay? And I'm learning a lot by listening.
Yeah.
So to go back to data point 2 now, one of the things I have realized is that when we have a loyalty to one of the two partisan political parties, we have trouble imagining ourselves ever voting, quote unquote, the other way or for the other side, because we've defined ourselves by this identity, this belonging, instead of what I'm proposing, which is that we start with the gospel, our understanding of the gospel, and then as non-committed political people, groups, that we partner with whichever party helps us bring about what we see as the telos, our teleological, right? What do we want to see? Like, do we want to see better education? Are we working for working class people? You know, what's the end goal? And then we align ourselves with whichever party helps bring that about. That's not what's happening, is what I'm discovering. By trying to move the fridge, I have discovered that there's no other electrical outlet in this kitchen. And that's why the fridge sits where it does. And until I tried to move it, I had never noticed that there's no other electrical plug in this room. So things start to make more sense, because by talking with my Republican friends and family and then saying, I just can't do it. But then also talking with my more progressive Democratic friends, liberals, realizing that they define themselves, especially when you're in the minority, by this commitment, this belonging, and you aren't free to step away in the way that I'm proposing, which is to live into kingdom reality, right? What they call like missional living, evangelicals would call it. You're not free to do that and then align yourself in any given election cycle with whoever's going to bring that about, because you've already predetermined your loyalty. And so I have hit a roadblock. I'm sort of stumped. And I find myself listening to people going like this. This is the sound I make a lot. Okay. All right. I see what's happening here.
Oh, whole milk, which I don't know if this is pasteurized whole milk or not, um, pulled high quality quote from the life of Brian, which is one of the funniest scenes in just
It
film
is.
history,
Yes.
where the different like Jewish resistance groups are the only thing worse than the Roman Empire is the Judean People's Front, and then because there's like all the variations of the People's Front, uh, that it's either that scene or they're like, what has Rome ever done for us? And they're like, well, the aqueducts. Okay, yeah, but I'm beside the aqueducts, and they go through this whole list.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do think even that scene and the story you're telling gets at this place where there are just different modes that have to happen when you're thinking about uh, uh, when you're thinking about how you orient your deeper faith commitments in a time that's intensely tribal. And I think that you know that politics being upstream from religion's one part, and it's at the same time as uh, there's a kind of a growth of cultural tribalism within the country. And so the
Yep.
moment the moment um, the practice of politics, like the collaborative communicative side of it, uh, gets intensely tribal, then the common for the common good is the common good of the tribe versus the common good of the whole, right?
Mm,
And so and there's always a sense that each tribe sees themselves as the victim of the other, so then it leverages up the horizon of the commons to one's tribe rather than the whole, which is like the feature, right, that democracy was attempting to undo. Because, well, when everyone was running around in tribes, you had a 30 years war in Europe.
yeah.
And when you once you start having tribes and then they're in the same area, it sets up this kind of competition. um, it's fun fact, like even the origin of religion, right, when it emerges in the species, a couple 100,000 years ago, was how do we have kind of shared rituals, experience, narratives, and symbols that create context of trust and cooperation when we start relating to groups bigger than we have the cognitive mechanisms to relate to, around 150 people.
Hmm.
um, and um, and that kind of anthropological research, something Robin Dunbar really developed, evolutionary anthropologist at Oxford, um, in his big book on friendship. Then when he wrote his book on religion, he noticed, oh, that's like actually the number where religion emerges in the species, is how do we have social trust and cooperation when we're past what we can remember. So like an individual person uh, averages about 150 people they can really know, and know in a way that they understand. They have a theory of mind of the internality of the other one. So I kind of know Bo, and I've understood we know each other more over time. And so I can kind of gauge what's Bo thinking, and we can learn to relate. And I know how to pitch things to each other and how we cooperate. And we know each other enough. We have a deep commitment to each other. So my life hits the fan. I don't call you and go, am I interrupting? I call you and go, oh, he sees me in a similar way I see him. And if Tripp told a story about his life, it includes a whole chapter on his friendship with Bo and blah blah blah. Like, and that's there. But and so that was the context for human beings for an overwhelming majority of our history until um, we get to the agricultural revolution, more stable locations, then you have to cooperate. How do you have trust? Anyway, religion emerged there. And so one of the things that big research project, and he ran a big research project that brought in scholars of different disciplines at Oxford did in looking at our contemporary context, is that when one of the perks in modernity that religion functioned as is for people to have a shared narrative that includes people in other tribes, if you're thinking within a state, political tribes, and like we're part of the body of Christ, which includes right uh, people in other nations. So, like our friend Paul in the chat, so like he's helping build communities for people in Africa, but if we just thought about our tribal loyalty in the country, we're thinking, oh, how my team's going to beat this team. But if you think about, oh, my identity from baptism, then all of the people he's serving are a part of my community. They're part of the shared body of Christ, right? So but as religion, as politics becomes upstream, that whole tribal energy takes a new form. And when culture, when the shared framework for relationships, even in our culture, aren't ones that have kind of a depth system of value, then that tribal intensity dials up. The competitive and kind of element of it goes up, and we're undermined, right? And so the one of the big conferences that came out from it, I attended online during lockdown, but the um, one of the things that you heard from people that are spending their time thinking about it is, ooh, what do we what what do we do, since a growing number of people in kind of post enlightenment context have trouble having a shared narrative that religions have functioned for us from the time we got over 150 people. How do we find it? And then what do we do, and how we find it is um, is being found on platforms that
Yeah.
don't involve reciprocal knowing, right?
Yeah.
It's an asymmetrical knowing oriented by deep surveillance of us that we aren't really aware of. And anyway, so um, like that's what, when we talked about this earlier, I just feel like there was this turn of politics being upstream from religion, but now there's also this sense of um, by the kind of growing uh, role of algorithmically mediated places of pseudo
Yeah.
connection. Uh, there's like when it wants to just show us our tribe and like it shows you the other tribe on the things people in your tribe mock and go, see, this is why I don't care about them, right?
Mm.
Or what is the thing that gets the most positive response is someone saying what you're thinking when you're in your worst self, you know um like, uh the Democrats just want to murder lots of babies and the Republicans want to occupy women's vaginas, and you couldn't imagine any other reasoning
Yeah.
there, right? So the the whole framework for connections that one has outside of the congregation space, where maybe your neighbor is different from you, has like has deteriorated our relational resilience to difference, and we're actually uncomfortable about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I that's why this situation just kind of creeps me out, and I go, I don't know what to do, right? And then the incentive structures for winning in an election cycles um, are a turnout game of tribal loyalists. which means if you think that's the way you win, you
Yeah.
exercise power to undermine the other tribe, and then and then you intensify the kind of uh, othering passions of your tribe,
Yeah.
and that's like good logic for election. And anyway, it just makes
Yeah.
me think. It
Yeah.
makes me depressed, Bo.
Four quick bullet point responses.
Sufficient depravity.
Four quick responses. The first is we're reading through the Gospel of John. We just started last week in our Bible study. And in doing the prep to get ready for it, I've been thinking a lot about the divisions that were in Jesus's time that we see in the Gospels that made the canon. And one of the things I've thought about is, the Herodians obviously being so compromised right off the bat. But then you have the Pharisees and Sadducees, the Essenes, who had boycotted the whole project, and the Zealots, which were just waiting their turn, right, to for violent overthrow. But you have these divisions, um, so present in the text and behind the text. And one of the things that gets distracting to people who are just wading into that context for the first time is that the Pharisees are presented often or interpreted by us to be the bad guys. Like Jesus is always butting heads with them and correcting them. But if you understand it in context, actually, in the same way, like that, I would say, like the Democrats, my Democratic friends and my DSA friends, that they're actually the reason that there's so much friction between them is that they're neighbors. They share a fence. They're actually so close. And the reason that we get so much attention on the Pharisees is that they were the ones who were sticking around to try and get the people to live in a way that God would honor and come and liberate them from this military oppression. And so Jesus butts heads with them, but it's because they were so close to each other that they shared, a perimeter. And one of the reasons we don't see the Essenes very much is that they're camped outside of town, right? They're nowhere except for John the Baptist. Obviously, the Herodians don't make it much into the story, but they were so prominent, And anyway, so I've been thinking about just the political divisions and religious divisions in Jesus's day and the fractured nature of the culture that he walked into or was raised in. And anyway, it's going to be interesting to read through the Gospel of John. So that was just one thing. The second thing is I've been paraphrasing Zizek a lot, and I've been saying, to my friends, I've been saying, the Republicans and the Democrats are both wrong, but they're right about each other. And what's funny, is that if you have never taken the critique of your adversary seriously, you have a blind spot in that you don't see the ridiculous nature of your own position. And you think if they just had the right information or had the right heart or the motivation, then they would be where I'm at. And the fact is that there's an asymmetrical nature, you use that word, to what's happening in our cultural climate right now. And so, like somebody said in the comment section, if the Dems ever want my vote, they have to stop backing genocide. And that's true. But can I just say that also is what happens on the left side of our spectrum, is that you could have, this, it gets called the litmus test or the purity test, that you could agree with somebody on 9 out of 10 of their stated values. But if that 10th one doesn't align, then you say, no, I'm out. Versus what is my observation of what happens on the right side of our cultural spectrum right now is that it doesn't work that way. And you can say, well, this person's flawed, or I wish they wouldn't do that, or whatever, but they're better than the alternative. And so it's an asymmetrical value system that I hear when I listen to people about why they are making the decisions they're making or how they're reading the headlines of the day. And so I don't believe in the horseshoe theory of politics, that at the far right and the far left, that they actually come together. They're actually closer than they think. I don't believe that. I really am seeing an asymmetrical priority structure and that they're not doing the same thing at all.
Yeah, well, um, I mean, if you think about on the right, like Steve Bannon basically sits around complaining about Elon Musk, but it's like, well, at least he gave money to the right team, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, oh God, this has just got me worked up trying to dial myself back, Bo. Um, but um, I feel like last time you were talking about your sermons through Daniel,
Yeah.
and I just feel like you deserve a victory lap because little did you know that 2 days after you talk about this, we were going to get this really sweet AI video of the golden statue of Donald Trump in future Palestine, uh,
When you
next to
texted
some
me
sweet
this,
condos. I was just like, oh
oh
my
my.
goodness. So we really do have the gift of prophecy at a whole new level that you didn't know about.
I, I wish that I didn't, but it turns out that yeah, even a broken clock is right twice a day. You know what they
I
say.
feel like that means you just need to you throw a sermon in on like swords to plowshares and see if that works that way too. You know, if your sermon predicts that, well, maybe next time we'll have this uh, a whole nother reworking of
Yeah.
our world where the military industrial complex is reoriented into the peace industrial complex,
Mm.
and you're like, you know what we need? Weapons of mass feeding. Let's.
Yes. Yes. Hey, you mentioned that you had been ruminating on something that I'm anxious to hear about. You've come up with sort of a working thesis. It may have been sparked or inspired by something your son wrote.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and so I tried like three different ways of coming up with a way of talking about this,
Okay.
and so I thought if I just told you about it, you could tell me you don't need that part. That's unnecessary because it started with I recently interviewed Norman Wirzba and Kevin Hart,
Okay.
and um, the Kevin Hart has this about a couple books on contemplation and phenomenology, and Norman has this phenomenology of prayer book, which after we talked about his new one, I was like, well, there's connections to this early book of yours, which is one of my favorites. Uh, so I was preparing for those interviews. Well, Elgin wrote for his uh, kind of an essay for his English class
Okay.
where you had to kind of argue for some policy, a local policy change, and he argued for phone-free schools. And one, it was an exceptional essay, um, but and he organized it by looking at the educational, psychological, and social impact of smartphones on teenagers,
Oh my.
educational impact, social, and uh, it was it was it was it was powerful. But it ends basically going, look at some point, parents, administrators, and teachers decided you just shouldn't have a smoking section at school. Like we should have uh, tobacco-free schools because it's just bad, right? And at some point, we're going to look back and go, why did they have smartphones at school? And he found all these studies, like it was nuts. Anyway, it was you kind of intuit that would be a good thing, and then he lines up all the studies and goes through all three areas, and you're just like, oh god. And at the end, he's just like, it's not a kid's job to learn how to
Oh,
manage something that is this destructive to their whole well-being. This is when the community is supposed to act,
wow.
and why not? And I was like, geez, bud, high
Wow.
quality. So um
Wow,
it
dude.
it's set up then, I was like, for Lent, it it set up a conversation with Alicia and I, where he even talked about, um, like, oh well, before smartphones and stuff, like when I was growing up, y'all were never distracted on looking at your phone and this kind of thing, and now it is, and then you have to decide how you want to manage it. He's like it's destructive at home, but you can't like make a policy about this for it as well. And Alicia and I are like, oh, okay, well then for Lent, I'm like, I'm not opening any social media apps until everyone's in bed. Well, I'll just say, there was I was like, I got to do this because I got to take my kids seriously. It's been the greatest thing ever. Like, you know how much, like, the day just goes way better. You get more done.
Really?
You don't get all worried about stuff.
Huh.
And he had this paragraph in his essay where the presence of the the presence of the smartphone means your assessment by other people and the demand to perform yourself is just always there. And so you're never really alone, was one of the aspects of it. And he had these studies on how it impacts just the presence of the phone while you're doing homework or reading or something, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I realized just how often I would check, because sometimes I'll just catch myself going to check, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not doing this. So that was like the context for
Huh.
going, now this is fascinating. I've been thinking about this. Um, and so hold on, let me grab my notes here. So uh, yeah, I want to pull this whole thing up. All right. So there's two little bits on this that uh, that's kind of like the narrative context.
Yeah.
All right. So Kevin Hart in his book talks about the difference between contemplation and fascination. And fascination, he's picking it up from Kant, who talks about, like, when one's fascinated, it's not merely like you're being charmed or kind of enchanted by something, but it's a false sense impression that's not natural.
Okay.
Um, it's and so and it involves an awareness of irresistible attraction and a kind of like immediacy feeling of passion, where it kind of like seizes you, where you're you're escaping into it. And
Okay.
um, one of the ways, like, this gets discussed in philosophers early on, are like people that wore like their their a divine phallus around their neck, or all these kinds of elements, right? Where it 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 kind of like holds your attention and keeps you from kind of orienting broadly. And he's like, yeah, and it's even worse, right, with the way a phone hits you. So he's drawing this problem of fascination. It's similar to Kierkegaard's kind of aesthetic stage, right? The rotation method of interest. So you're always trying to escape boredom into something else that generates even a deeper need to conquer the
Okay.
boredom. Or in his Diary of the Seducer, right? Like, he never wants a loving relationship. That's a whole different kind of work. But the whole act of seducing another person over and over is like this immediate feedback loop of just enjoyment that burns out into a kind of repressive anxiety and stuff that you're just trying to avoid. So
Mm.
when he talks about contemplation, um, it is a kind of a deep, encompassing reflection on the moral and mortal self. And there's all these different ways he kind of tells it, how it shows up in religion and philosophy across cultures and
Okay.
such. Uh, but he uses Richard of St. Victor's um, kind of definition that I just found really helpful, where he says, it is a penetrating and free view of the mind, extended everywhere in the perceiving of things. Um, and so, like, contemplation is a kind of generative orientation. It leads to seeing the world in its pristine strangeness. It can bring wonder. It allows one to go deeper into the object of one's reflection. In the return from contemplation, when you like the impact of it on a person is it brings a kind of refreshment, an increased understanding of the self, one's finitude and location, and the world apart from it, and the way one relates to it. Aristotle, he talks about like this is like a thick form of happiness, one that's not fleeting, because it's how you engage and relate to the world.
Huh.
And fascination, on the other hand, is like stultifying and constraining. When you're fascinated, one cannot think properly. The mind spins.
Yeah.
The experience leaves one depleted and dry. It results in less wonder, kind of petrification of the soul, because you're just being fascinated in this kind of sense. It can lead to being stuck on something, and you prevent you're not incorporating what you're attending to into the whole. You're just running from things you attend to that to fascinate you.
Huh.
Um, and
Yeah.
like Kant called one of his lines on fascination is he says that the state of fascination is similar to that of a bird that flutters against a mirror in which he sees his reflection, and at one moment takes it for a real bird, and at another not. um and you know, and that kind of like is pointing at this sense of it's like a kind of frustration and a dead end for sound judgment. And you know, if you were to take the uh desired outcomes of those designing what mediates via platforms and purchasing platforms and social media platforms, uh, what their like design goals are for the smartphone, it's essentially
Mhm.
fascination,
Hmm.
you know. um, and fascination is the activity of idolatry in the wisdom traditions. Like
Hmm.
if you're thinking in monotheistic ones,
That's
it
interesting.
is the orientation to the false self, or the fuel to the monkey mind. Like, and he's looking at like this is just something these wisdom traditions have developed.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's got me thinking about the consequences epistemologically of a culture of fascination. Because if fascination, the form of life oriented by the ritual engagement, right, with the phone and what it
Yeah.
how it occupies our mind, it
Yeah.
prevents us from kind of having epistemic judgment due to the false sense impressions, the irresistible attraction and passion it generates.
Yeah.
Um, and so the contemplation seems even more necessary to
Yeah.
engage reality as it is and make decisions from deeper values. And so like contemplation is a way of having exercises that wean one away from fascination. And and so the like that kind of uh oh that it it helped me, it made me think, right, like
Yeah.
in the middle of taking my son seriously and doing
Hmm.
this for Lent, and then thinking about it, that um it's it's pointing at a way that we could be in a sense enchanted or entranced by an idol that undermines the very kind of engagement of the world where we encounter the other in their neighbor or enemy, but also the
Yeah.
divine other or nature.
Huh.
Fascination um, is uh, when you think of like that bird running
Yeah.
into the mirror. It may I just feel like that could be some way that like that helps me understand
Yeah. That's
like
so
the kind of
interesting.
spiritual consequences of adopting technology and the rituals it imposes on us unreflectively. Does that make sense?
Oh man, I've never heard this before. This is so helpful because, like, as I'm hearing it, I'm just going down a list in my mind of things that I do that, like, implicate me in the exact thing that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, it it yeah, I'm it's like one of those things where I'm like thoroughly disturbed in the present and don't know how to make sense of it, but I feel like I need to, so
Yeah.
that I can uh like internalize a thought out idea, so I can hold myself accountable of sorts.
Yeah.
Because part of what fascination does, right? Like a lot of times we judge things by the content of something rather
Yeah.
than the form. and the form of contemplation versus the form of fascination, like
Yeah.
how one orients to reality.
Yeah.
If fascination is generating the problems, it doesn't matter what the content is, right? It's like think of, okay, one of the biggest assholes in undergrad, like was the one who knew the most Bible verses, you know? So like the content, great. Like, oh, I could quote Jesus all day long. But the form of it, uh,
Mm.
you're like, where did it come from? Um, and so and this is where it like led me back to Norman's book on the phenomenology of prayer, because
Yeah.
and this is in his new book. Um, he talks about that part of the modern context, or kind of like the modern situation, is one where we have this fascinations generated this deep desire of having more, doing and being more, that like we've internalized this demand that we have to have more, do more, be more, and it's created a kind of existential um, emptiness where the challenge of enoughness, right? Um, and so in his phenomenology of prayer book, he kind of points out that prayer isn't just about like the words; it's actually about the way one holds attention, and that how one holds attention
Mm.
can orient one towards responsibility and connection, and in one's life or not, right? And so this kind of like prayer without ceasing is like
Mm.
generally contemplating your place and agency and activity in the world, and the listening to the reality and particularities of the other, and that fascination kind of undoes it.
Man,
And so
this
it
is convicting.
it sets up where you ultimately, when fascinated, become numb to the other
Yeah.
and numb to meaning.
Yeah.
And so the 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 function of fascination in its relationship to our attention and our time sets up where we have a kind of scarcity of attention and for what ultimately matters most, because fascination has consumed it. um and uh and so like part it started making me think of like contemplation, or like this a kind of a thick account of prayer, both of which are thinking the phenomenology of it makes what could be like, I want to use my voice in these platforms, or I want to articulate this or whatever, uh, is um like, what if that whole system and structures the problem rather than the content of any of it, and yet we're fascinated by getting to click on our tribe or perform
Yep.
our tribe or whatever.
Wow.
And so I don't know what to do with it. Those are like
Oh,
the little bits of it.
yeah.
And I don't think I would have taken it as seriously if, you know,
Yeah.
I hadn't let Elgin
Yeah.
convict me of sorts.
Oh man, this is, well, first of all, it's very convicting because recently I downloaded a new app called Time Hop, and it shows you pictures from whatever the day is, a year ago, 2 years ago, up to I have to 10 years ago. And one of the things that I have realized, I've only had the app for a week, but one of the things I have realized is how much my life has changed over the last 10 years. Because not only have I moved from LA, then to Portland, now to Southern Idaho, but also because of finishing up, timing out of my academic pursuit of the doctorate, and then in COVID. And those were two massive changes. And then when geographic moves, and I got to be honest, man, one of the things that this app has exposed, I mean, it's not designed to, but I've just watched that my life has gotten smaller and shallower with the changes of the last 10 years. But I would also say, like, my prayer life has as well. And also my social network has never been as tiny as it is now. It's been interesting to watch how, I used to be out and about a lot, and I'm just not anymore. But I spend more time. So this is the second thing, on things like, I love Instagram. I absolutely love Instagram. But I'd rather watch an interesting video about riding your bike than actually take the time to go ride my bike. And it's a bad trend. And but I think the same about politics and the same about prayer. So, dude, this is like really, really interesting. Side note: our chat section in this video is hilarious and really insightful at times. And I just want to thank everybody for chiming in because it's really funny. But some of these points are like really, really good.
The so when I get fascinated with an idea like
Yeah,
this, um, I find the process of writing it out helpful. For kind of internalizing it. Or there's a kind of thinking that happens when you have to put it to text. So all those things are kind of like dialed in, but I don't
yeah,
know what form it looks like. So I'm interested in what you think. Like
yeah,
what all those are all Tripp's random thoughts that are connected to this. But like
yeah.
what's like the point where you go, okay, if you wanted to organize it, might organize it this way.
So there are certain concepts or vocabulary words that once they are introduced to you become like a lens through which you can evaluate something, right? Or a rubric through which you can make decisions. I think Lent is the perfect time to ask a question about contemplation, like the life of prayer, and fascination. And because the contrast is so stark as you've presented it here. So my immediate thought is that if you're part of a group, whether it's a small group or a book club, an accountability group, right, a service organization, that if you brought this idea and a proposal and asked if anybody else would be interested in doing an experiment together, and whether you agreed, like you said, that up until a certain hour of the day, you weren't going to open any of these apps, whether it's, purchasing like an Amazon or an Instagram or whatever, and then to hold each other accountable, but also to compare notes and help inspire one another. But my immediate thought is you would have to, the most fruitful way to do this is by doing it in community, so that if you had a small group of people who wanted to move from, say, being fascinated to sitting more with contemplation, and there was an intentionality about it, that would seem to me to be the most fruitful way that you could entertain the idea or experiment with the practice. And because one of the ways to get out of the terrible habit of being isolated in front of this app is to know that others are on the journey with you. And so it brings you out of that singular alone fascination. But if you paired that with communal or connection, contemplation, I'll bet that would be a really fruitful thing, exercise to do for a season.
Yeah. Are you volunteering, Bo? Is this what?
Can I be honest? I'm genuinely thinking, do could I do this? Like,
You'll
I'm not
catch yourself just like naturally opening it, and then be like, "Oh, damn, Tripp!" Like, oh, and especially when you're on the potty, you know.
yeah. Wow.
It's,
All right,
oh, here
Joshua.
was one other little bit about this
Okay.
that thinking about your uh in relationship to you know like the church context. Elgin, when deciding what he want, like we were talking about, oh well, this stuff with youth group. He goes, yeah, well, I don't like really those kind of gatherings. And I was like, why? He goes, well, basically, like, I don't sit on my phone, and like the youth and most of even the adults will spend half the time looking at their phone,
Huh.
and so you never really get to know each other, and then you don't have a um, the half the time it's just them looking at their phone, or then like talking about what their friends posted on their phone. And he's like, it just seems like a kind of a shallow waste of time, so I'd rather do my homework. And so he's got to where if I'm going to go to this thing, it's, are we allowed to, are we going to make everyone put their phones up? Because otherwise it's just the relationships remain shallow and you never end up building deeper connections. And
Mm.
he's like, he's like, when you were a youth minister, everyone seemed to like to be really good friends. And I was like, yeah, well, like, we collected phones like the
Mm.
moment you walked in. And he goes, yeah, people just blow up. You just kind of have to have it, as everyone knows, and then they might just go to a different um youth group, or it was it was just for him. Like, he was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go to that thing. They're just going to sit on their phones half the time.
Huh.
And um I was like, ooh, that's that's uh that's something, you know um so Alicia and I are talking about uh how we might change things up, like,
Mm.
at a certain time all devices have to be plugged in at a completely different place and you can't use them. And anyway, um but yeah, yeah, but I just like, that idea of going these spaces where, like, as a 15-year youth group veteran,
Yeah.
like, he's like, yeah, but they're gonna I don't know, it's gonna be shallow, they just have their phones around.
Huh.
And I'm like, that's sad, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, even like half the time at lunch, everyone just sits on their phone the whole time because they have them, and then they weren't, theoretically supposed to be using them in class, and they just feel like they're going to be left out of whatever their friends are doing if they don't sit there and do it. Um,
Mm.
and I thought, oh, that's why that image in Kant, right, of the bird, just like looking at a mirror, running into it, and then being like, oh, you're a bird, and it's really just fascinated with itself.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a frontal cortex. It doesn't. It has not figured out, like our species, a way
Yeah.
to put an overwhelmingly large amount of energy into the very part of the brain that lets you have long-term decisions based on deep values. Um, and then I feel like we're the idea that my son's like, the
Yeah.
school and the church are both permitting us to be fascinated. And then that
Mm.
same time, I have these two interviews I prepared for that are both like, yeah, and that's called idolatry, Trip.
Mm.
And I was like, oh,
Jeez.
I, yeah, we should try. You think about how we could do it as an experiment.
Okay.
And then next time we could tell people about it on here, and those that want to try doing it with us, then we could try it that way.
Two funny comments in our comment section. One is from Josh, who came up with the idea for an app that we use to limit our access to other apps. And we make a chat forum for accountability that you have to check in once an hour to report on your lack of app use. So you earn points and badges for each check-in. So you're rewarded for using an app that prevents you from using apps.
Oh, that's,
It's pretty good.
yeah,
Somebody else says interesting activity use or active use, i.e., posting, is supposed to have a benefit, but no lurking. So if you're just scrolling but you're not interacting, that's interesting. And then Paul said that, I think this is Paul, blessed peacemaker,
yeah, yeah.
said that he deleted all of his social media apps. So that might be something you could give up for Lent, is your social media, you get them off your phone, and then you would have to have, he says, the pain of downloading them again and signing in makes it a little preventative. Lori says it's like a sword drill for apps.
Yeah. When I did uh um when I was at a church and we would do these different experiments in truth, one of the things we did was have a group chat,
Yeah.
you know, Because like then you're while everyone's trying to do something, it's not like you part of what you're doing with the apps are essentially like we did a social media fast during Lent one year, right? Is you're wanting to be seen,
Yeah.
but
Oh, for
then the
sure.
algorithm decides who gets to see you and all this kind of thing. Um, and
Huh.
it was interesting to see how many of the teenagers, the moment you're not doing that, but you're just texting your like your 20 friends that are doing the experiment with you, like you
Yeah.
still get seen, but you actually like get thoughtful responses from each other because you're not just sitting there scrolling or doing whatever. You're like, oh, I shared this, and then people actually interact and stuff on it. um and and it gives you like a way of where you want that connection, where you're like picking up the phone for connection and a kind of like
Yeah.
simulated version of it, that
Yeah.
then you're actually like having real words being heard by your peers and vice versa.
Mm,
uh
I like this. Hey, can I tell you a quick story that brings this full circle to how we started today too?
mm-hmm.
So I was sent a screenshot this week in a wives and mothers of our city uh, group. Somebody said, "Hey, I heard that there's somebody who fixes up old bikes and gives them away." And then somebody in my congregation posted and said, "Yeah, our pastor does that. You can just bring them to the church, blah, blah, blah." Okay. So that was cool. Standalone. And that's like the good part of social media is like the networking. But then yesterday, one of our other groups, the that I'd mentioned, the clothing helpers were here and they saw the bikes and they said, "Is this something that's happening?" And I told them the story and they said, "We have tons of bikes." And I said, "Why would you have so many bikes?" Listen to the story, Tripp. In the town just north of us, there's an older gentleman named Arthur, is Art, that used to collect bikes every fall and then give them away to kids for Christmas. But that he, in his retirement, has gotten old enough, I guess, that whatever happened this year, maybe a health something, he didn't do it this Christmas. But a bunch of people had already been collecting bikes, waiting for Arthur to say, "Okay, bring them." And he never did last year. So a bunch of people, I've heard of 5 so far, have multiple bikes just sitting in their garage taking up space that they didn't get to take to Art last year and they want to get rid of. So I said, "Bring them here." Right? So they're bringing them in. And then somebody said, you know, the one thing Art can still do is to true wheels, like to make wheels so they don't wobble, which is that's the one thing I can't do. I can do all the other stuff. I don't mess with the wheels. I always take them to my local shop. And they said, "Do you want me to connect you with Art? He would love to come down and work on these bikes with you because, he would love a partner." And I was like, this is one of the best developments. So it started as a silly, social media post, but then it moved out into actual connection and community. And I'm so hopeful about making a connection with this person and this group and to actually be in community with like-minded people. It's the kind of thing like my heart longs for, but in the absence of, I end up just sitting and scrolling on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube.
it it's like a co-passion.
Uh, yes, it is. Well, this has been very interesting. I have a lot to think about because this time hop thing has really exposed that I'm going in the wrong direction. And so maybe this came at the perfect time in Lent for me to contemplate some of the bad trends that have been exposed by this 10-year look back. And Tripp, maybe this was just a word for me this morning.
Oh, watch out, watch
You ever
out,
you
Bo.
ever preach to yourself?
Yeah, I yeah I think I'm like most aggressive when I preach to myself.
Me too. Me too. There are sometimes I get really fired up and somebody says, "Man, what got into you?" And I said, "Well, I realized that I was talking
It was
about,
autobiographical.
yeah." I actually think that's why Jesus, when he snapped at Peter and said, "Get thee behind me." I mean, why did he call his best friend Satan, right? "Get thee behind me." I think it's because in one sense, he recognized in the mirror of Peter's offering that Peter was offering him the very thing he was most tempted by. I think he got that rowdy because he was actually concerned about what the temptation, the pull of what was being offered him.
Uh huh.
And he had to be that aggressive to push away, right? Because it wasn't a mild
Yeah.
invitation.
Well, and it's like it's an echo of one of the three temptations in the wilderness, right?
Yeah.
Like Peter's wanting him to essentially bow the knee and become the new Caesar of sorts, right? Like, oh, you can go take power, and
Yeah.
so it's like you're even doing this. Come on. Last time someone did this to me, it was freaking Satan.
Oh, I've never heard that explanation. That's great.
You, okay? So that time hop app, I
Yeah.
don't remember when this was, um, because I haven't looked at it recently. But when I did, it I had a similar experience. But there was one where it popped up of me and you and Tim Burnett with Flat Pete,
Flat Pete.
and this was when Peter Rollins canceled on me and Bo and Tim, and we were going to Santa Barbara for a Ryan Adams concert, and he cancels
Yeah.
on us to go with Rob Bell to Oprah's house, and I'm like, what? What? Like that one? That does not sound like a fun meal. I mean, and if I think well, hanging out with Oprah would not be that enjoyable, I just think it's even less enjoyable for Pete. You know, like there's a like she's gonna be like, oh, Soul Sunday stuff, and then Pete's gonna be like, actually, it's soul sucking. If Pete does this material, so towards basically, she's the representative of like she's the high priestess of like Western Buddhist energy manifesting that he likes to complain about. So I'm like, we're getting ditched for Oprah, and we're going to a concert, and blah blah blah, right? So, well, Flat Stanley, if people have had a kid that does this, where they have that's a little kid's book, this guy, but little kid Stanley becomes flat, and he gets mailed around, and he visits all these places, and then they'll make one, send it to friends and family, and you take pictures of Flat Stanley in these different places, send back to the kid. Well, we made a Flat Pete, uh, and gave Flat Pete a Love Wins T-shirt, um, and then took him around with us to all the. So there, it was like one day the
Oh
Time Hop
my
just had
God.
us at all these breweries with Flat Pete, and then us at the concert with Flat Pete, and and
Yeah.
uh, and getting single ladies to take pictures with Flat Pete to send to Pete, and they were all there. I just started laughing so hard. It was like the
That's
normally Time Hop's like, oh, here's all these random things, but there were like 5 or 6 Flat Pete pictures, and you see the three of us with Flat Pete running around Santa
I
Barbara,
love it.
um, and then us in a parking deck with Domino's Pizza, and that just made me start laughing even
Yeah.
better. He's sitting on top of a pizza. Oh man,
Hey, I want to give the final word. I want to give the final word here to Paul, who says that if we prioritize the least of these, we'll never get in bed with any side or aspect of the empire that crushes Christ. We live in the presence and need of Christ. If we meet at Christ in the least of these, meeting their suffering becomes more important than any political or theological difference.
ooh,
It's pretty powerful.
yes, yes. Well, Wilbo, this has been fun, and
This has been
thank
fun.
you for everyone that's
I've
been
learned a
hanging
lot.
out. Um, and I think it might be the first time on a podcast I said really nice stuff about Immanuel Kant. You know, I'm going to be the other. Normally,
Wow.
yeah,
That was nerdy. That's a great
Kant
note.
really set up for some solving the Kantian predicament, set up for some really bad trends in modern theology. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Maybe we should talk about that in the future.
Well, we can do that.
I would be interested.
Yeah. But you don't want to do it right now because then you'll be here another hour.
No. I was going to say we can't get into Kantian dualism in the final 5 minutes of the show.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, awesome. Well, it was good to see you. Thank you for everyone that it is hung out. Y'all should all come hang out with us in person at Theology Beer Camp.
Do it.
And I've thought about. See, this is what happens when Tripp gets an idea, being like, "Ooh, we're not going to have phones at camp. See what kind of response I get. Be like,
but that's actually a perfect pickle, because you get so many mentions and so much good publicity by people having their phones at camp, right? So it would be tough to forsake that.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was thinking about it and going, but we have a photographer there. Like, everyone can go get professional photography done. And then I thought, what if we had a those like photo booth type things people do at if we have one of those, at any point you can go grab people that you're friends with, new people you meet, go in the photo booth, and you're like, they'll all be available for you to download after. So like,
that's so good. I do this at weddings. I tell people, hey, we have a professional photographer who's going to take better quality pictures than you possibly could on your phone, although that may not be true anymore with these new phones. But
they at least know how to hold it and frame a picture.
Yeah. But I invite people to put away their phones and to be fully present and to let the photographer do their job, and we'll make the pictures available later.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
very interesting.
And Jasmine suggesting that I'm becoming a Corona Kantian. Corona's a cigar size, which this one is a Corona. Which Lori, who I know is also a cigar fan, this is a new cigar I've really gotten into. Eleanor Rose. It's delicious. Not super popular, but it's amazing. And there you go. That's what people want to know.
All right, good note to end on. This is really fun. I gotta go contemplate.
Look, it's okay. You could say you gotta go to the bathroom. All right.